Okay, hi everyone. I'm Alex, and welcome back to Intro to Full Stack Web Decal. And this week, specifically this lecture, we will be going over CSS2. And from the last lecture, CSS1, you should be kind of get a feel of what CSS is doing. Essentially, it's kind of like a language. It's not really like a computer science language per se. It's more like a markup language, and it just helps the website and to make it look prettier, essentially. And it turns out that CSS can be pretty tricky. And this lecture will be dealing with all the tricky stuff. But first of all, let's do some announcements. HTML homework is due tonight. I know that I've mentioned in the Slack channel that's due before lecture, but we do have a grace period until midnight, just to kind of like alleviate some of the stress that Berkeley has already imposed upon us. So yeah, all the homeworks are now due tonight, but we strongly recommend you to turn it in before our lecture. And CSS homework has already been released, and it's due next week, Tuesday. It's not a particularly long homework, but it can be kind of tricky sometimes. But I feel like after this lecture, you should be able to do the CSS homework with ease, at least the first few parts. And wait, what I have is, sorry, I have it twice. And also, I want to give a attendance policy updates. So beforehand, before this lecture, we're all doing our kind of like sending the magic word in chat thing. And it turns out that this method is particularly inefficient. As a result, we are going to use Google Form to keep track of everything. And this is how it's going to be work. This is how it goes to work. Someone's not on mute. Someone's on mute, please, very soft. Essentially, we will be, during the middle of the lecture, we'll be giving out a Google Form link and also the magic word. And you will have a window of around 10 minutes to fill that out. It's a very short Google Form. It's like name, student ID, magic word, that's it. This way we can just keep track of all of them. It's much easier. And also, if you cannot go to one lecture, please fill out the attendance missing form. The attendance missing form is the Notion page announcement, and also it's in the Slack channel announcement. So yeah, and when you're filling the attendance missing form, make sure you fill it before the lecture, so that we can, take your attendance into consideration. Otherwise, it will be counted as an only excused absence. So yeah. Are there any questions? The attendance box is clear. Alrighty. Now let's get started. So CSS demo. Today we're not actually going to use any slides because I find to actually teach y'all CSS, we need to kind of like demo it. So we are going to do the entire class in code demo. And if you want to follow along, please go to this link. It's webdevatberkeley /full stack decal /tree/main/homework to CSS. This is, oh wait, I think this is the wrong link actually. How many excused absence do we get? Excused absence, let's just say you don't get many. We won't disclose, kind of like, so usually we judge absences case by case. If you do have a valid excuse, then we will like treat this as an excuse absence. If your like excuse doesn't really make sense, or you like have too many absences during a semester, we will, we'll probably take everything into consideration. Actually, I think that's the wrong link. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. Accidentally clicked the wrong link. It should be this one. Yeah, that's a homework link. Sorry about that. Let me send in chat. Okay. All right. Yeah, if you want to follow along, feel free to clone it. No worries. Yeah, link is also in the chat. So cool. Let's get into it. And here's kind of my setup right now. I have Chrome opening up the file locally, as you can see here. And this is the HTML file. So we have two files in the CSS2 folders. The first file is the index.html file. The second file is the style.css. As you can see, there are a lot of comments. We'll be uncommenting some of these during the lecture to demonstrate some cool CSS properties. And there are also some notes here. And yeah, but for HTML, it's the same thing. So yeah. And just as a review, this is how you will link a style sheet to HTML. So yeah, you use the link tag, and then you use the relative file link, file path in the reference tag, in the reference attribute. So yeah. Now let's take a look at our page right now. So this is our little CSS demo page. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. There's a title called Advanced CSS Demo. This is just an H1 tag, and there isn't any style on it. And afterwards, we have a paragraph. It says, "Hi, this is an inline element." And this is a p tag. We'll be going over span in a short while. And then we have three boxes. We'll be talking about these boxes in a while as well. There's a question in chat. Are we supposed to pull the demo from somewhere? If you want, you can pull the demo. It's from the link I just sent. So yeah, if you want, you can clone the entire GitHub repo and then go into the CSS2 folder and follow along. If you don't want to follow along, you can just look at the Zoom. So, yeah. Cool. Oops, sorry. Okay, now the first thing that we are going to learn in this lecture is called inline versus block. So these two are two display types of a HTML element. So we have inline. What is inline? Inline is usually it's a literal meaning. When an element is an inline element, it means that it can only appear kind of like as this paragraph. It doesn't have any height or any width property. So let's take a look at this span. So a span tag, a span element is an inline element. As you can see, this span here has a color of red. And as you can see, it says, "Hi, this is an inline element." And you might notice that even though span and p, like there are two different elements, they're still like put together besides each other. And if we add this, if we change this to display block and we refresh, as you can see, inline suddenly goes to the next line. And this is because inline element doesn't have a height or a width. However, if you change it to a block element, it defaults to takes up the whole width of the website. We can take a look at the inspect tool. So if you use the inspect tool and see and hover on the inline element right now, even though it says inline, it's not an inline element. It has block as its property, as you can see here, display block. And as you can see, it takes up the entire space, the entire width of the website. Now let's change it back. If we comment this thing out and we hit refresh again, as you can see this, this right now, it doesn't have any widths. The width is default to the inline, the width of the word inline. So this is kind of like the difference between the inline element and the block element. There's a question in chat. Can we just copy and paste the code on GitHub onto our own text editor? Yeah, for sure. You can do that as well. I think someone didn't mute themselves. Please mute yourself. Thank you. And okay. And so span is an inline element. And it turns out that we don't have that much inline elements, and quite a lot of elements are block elements. So yeah, you can treat almost all elements as block. But yeah. So this is inline versus block. Now let's talk about positioning. Actually, before we move on, are there any questions? All right. If you have any questions, feel free to raise in the chat. So Kelly asked, is span an inline element? Yes, span is an inline element. There's only a few inline elements in HTML. We can take a look actually. Yeah, so usually all the inline elements are kind of like decorations. So for instance, highlight. You can use, yeah, so usually people use span for highlight or for bold. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the link tag is an inline element. So this should be pretty familiar. If we create a link, as you can see, this is an inline element. If it's a block element, it will actually take up the width. So yeah, this is another inline element. I'll delete this. As you can see, we have a couple more inline elements, but yeah. Can we also give a class to the span element? Yes. Essentially, all the HTML elements can take a class or an ID. Alrighty. Now let's move on. Oops. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, now let's take a look at the 3 boxes here. So this is how I construct my boxes. There is a box container outside of the 3 boxes. And these boxes and the box container, they are all made of div. So div is kind of like a very, very powerful HTML tag that you can use to create different sorts of things, especially website layout. So in our case, we do it using div. And there are 3 boxes: box 1, box 2, and box 3. And if we take a look at box 1, box 2, and box 3, they are both displayed as block, and this way it becomes a box, right? Because this way it has a height, it has a width. It also has a padding of 30 pixel. Padding, we have already taught padding, right? But just to reiterate, padding is the same. So if this is a border, then padding is the distance from the content to the border. So that's padding. And it's 30 pixel. Why 30 pixel? Just to make it prettier. And we also have text align center. Text align center is used to center this text horizontally. We also have a width. And you might notice we don't have a height. This is because if we use a padding, you don't really need a height to kind of like make the box look like high, because the actual content itself already takes up a lot of space. There's a question. Did we get the attendance link yet? No. And yeah, and also there's a color white. It simply says font, the color of the font is white. So these properties are the properties for all the 3 boxes. Individually, they have different color. So cool. Now with this in place, let's talk about the positioning. Okay, there's a question in chat. How's the word inline read again? The inline, this span tag, has a CSS here. Essentially, we select span, and then we mark it red. This is why it's red. Now let's talk about positioning. Or should I say dive deeper into positioning, because I believe Hector already covers some of the positioning stuff in the first lecture. But yeah, now we can see it like in action, which is pretty cool. So there are 4 kinds of positioning. I know that we have top 5. Actually, there's also one called sticky, but we won't really cover it right now because it's kind of advanced and you don't really need it, I feel like. But these are the powerhouses for positioning. And first one is static. This is a default position of all elements. Essentially, if you create an HTML tag, the tag is default to static position. And there's also a position called relative. This means the position relative to the default. So usually you will see relative and like right 10 pixel in combination, or like left 10 pixel. This simply means that if it will shift the element from the original position to the right by 10 pixel, or to the left by 10 pixel. This is what relative means. It shifts the elements according to the original position. We also have fixed. So fixed is position relative to the browser, or should I say the view window, to be precise. And yeah, we'll see how this essentially, if you use element, if you use like position fixed and then left 0 pixel, you will see the element kind of like just boom, and then stick to the left of the browser. So yeah. There's also position absolute. This is pretty similar to fixed, but instead of like fixed relative to the browser, it's relative to its parent. So let's see all these 4 positioning in real time. So first of all, let's try our relative. Now I have changed box 2's position to relative, and then have a left 50 pixel. And let's save it. Let's hit refresh. As you can see, right now, in the left of the original position, there are 50 pixels. There's a distance of 50 pixels here. And as a result, the elements shift to the right by 50 pixels. So this is kind of tricky. So left is not saying that it will shift to the left by 50 pixels. It's saying that compared to the original position, the left will have 50 pixel kind of like as a margin. So this is what it's saying. And if we change it to right, as you can see, right now right has kind of like a margin of 50 pixel. And if we change it to top, now top has a margin of 50 pixel. You see how it goes. Change it back to left. Okay. So this is position relative. Now let's take a look at position fixed. So I just changed it to position fixed, and the code is right 0 pixel. As you can see, after I hit refresh, the box 2 suddenly jumps here. And what's different about fixed is that box 3 also moves up a little bit. So this is pretty weird, right? Why box 2 will influence box 3? This is because the box 2 is taken out of the normal flow of all the boxes. So there's something called a normal flow. It's kind of like how all the elements are placed on the website one by one each other. And if we are using position relative, it won't take the box out of the normal flow. It won't just kind of like shift it a little bit. However, if you use fix, it will take this box out of the normal flow. What this means is that when box 1 and box 3 when the browser is trying to position in box 1 and box 3, it won't consider the existence of box 2. So box 2 is kind of like isolated from all the other elements. And the existence of box 2 will not influence the other elements at all. And therefore, since box 2 like no longer appears, at least to box 3, so box 2 move up a little bit and takes the place of box 2. And now box 2 is just here. It's right 0 pixel. And right 0 pixel simply means that the right-hand side, it has 0 pixel margin to the browser or to the view window. So yeah. And we can change it to left. And here refresh. As you can see, box 2 now has 0 pixel to its left. And you might notice that the box 2, even though it looks like it's still in the original position, it's taken out of the normal flow. As a result, box 3 goes up a little bit and take the original position of box 2. Does this all make sense? What's the commenting and uncommenting shortkey? I'm using VS Code, and the shortkey, if you're using Mac, is command/. So command and then slash. Are there any questions for fixed position? It's critical to understand fixed before we move on to absolute. Okay, so there's a question, why does box 2 move when it says right 0 pixel? Yeah, so the box 2 move when, this is because, first of all, it's position fixed. We need to say it's position fixed. Otherwise, like right 0 pixel won't really matters. And when we are saying right 0 pixel, it's saying that the box 2 and the browser, like the right side of box 2 and the right side of the browser will have a distance of 0 pixel. So if we change it to like 20 pixel, then it's saying that the right side of the box 2 will have a 20 pixel distance to the right side of the browser. And so yeah, and this is why it moves. When the position is fixed, it moves. Let's see. Fix also fix a blocking place while scrolling as well, right? I don't think so. There's a property called sticky. Sticky, I think it does that. I can't really scroll right now because I don't have that much element. I guess I can copy and paste a bunch of boxes. Oh, you actually fixed. Yeah. It's actually, you actually fixed the element. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, fix. Yeah. No, yeah, this makes sense because it's relative to the browser. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so there was a question in chat. It's like it's asking whether fix also fix a box blocking place while scrolling. The answer is yes. It also fix a blocking place. Cool. Do we have any other questions? All right. Now let's look at absolute. So to really demonstrate absolute, we actually need to change the position of the parent container. So first of all, if you recall, all the boxes are stored inside the box container div, and the box container div has it doesn't have like any CSS properties, and now we give it a position relative, and we give it a left 100 pixel. What this means is that box 1, box 2, and box 3, it will all shift to the left, to the right by 100 pixel. Yeah, this is because I added a left 100 pixel for the box container and set its position to relative. And now let's take a look at position absolute. So position absolute, this is also changing box 2. So position absolute, if you remember, it's relative to the parent's position. So if we hit refresh, as you can see, so left is 50 pixel. Right now it's like it's here. And if it's sticky, if it's fixed, it will actually be here. And this is because it's relative. Fixed and absolute, they're relative to different things. Fixed is relative to the browser window, but relative is relative. Sorry, but absolute is relative to the parent container. So let's change it back to absolute. And if you look at box 3, its parent container is this box container thing. So what does parent container means? It simply means the HTML tag that's outside of the current element. So the HTML tag that's outside of box 3 is called the box container. And the box container right now has a position relative at 100 pixel left. And as a result, if we change it to absolute and left 50 pixel, this is saying that the left side of the box 2 will have a 50 pixel distance from the parent container's left side. So as you can see here, there's a 50 pixel distance. And you might notice that the red box 3 actually moves up a little bit and take place of the original box 2 position. This is because that the absolute positioning is very similar to the fixed positioning, where it will also take the element out of the normal flow. So yeah. Do we have any questions? I guess we should probably demonstrate some other things. So for instance, if we change it to top 50 pixel, as you can see, the box container is here and the box 2 is here. This is because we are using position absolute, and there's a top distance of 50 pixel. All right. Now we have covered all the positionings. Do we have any questions? Also, please excuse me for 1 minute. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so there's a question in chat. Why does top overlap with box 1 when left didn't? Why does top overlap with box 1 when? Oh, okay. Yeah, so essentially the top, when we do top 50 pixel, it's essentially saying that you will have 50 pixel distance from the top of the container. So overlapping with any of the boxes doesn't really matter that much. What it matters is the position relative to the parent container. Yeah, the parent container is authoritative element, yes. Can you remind us what spans does? Span is kind of like a text, inline text. So does that mean that block 2 broke out of normal flow? Yes. Both absolute positioning and fixed positioning will break the HTML element out of the normal flow. Cool. Now let's take a look at the next thing. Okay, magic word time. All right, so today's magic word is Flexbox. And this is how you will spell it. And we will be, so everyone please, actually I should probably stop sharing the link, stop sharing the screen. Yeah, the link, I will send you out the link in 1 second. Do that right now. Oh yeah, for those of you who come in late, please don't type the magic word in the chat. We're doing the attendance via Google form right now. So you will have a 10-minute window to fill out your information on the Google form. This just makes our life easier. So yeah.
Is a magic word Flexbox?
Yes, the magic word is Flexbox. The cap doesn't matter. Is it one word? Yeah, it's one word. It's yeah, there are no spaces in between or hyphen. All right. Yeah, if you can, please fill it out now. When I see like 37 responses, I guess I will close the link. All right, I guess we can continue. I haven't, and by the way, I haven't closed the link yet. I'll close it probably in 5 minutes. So, okay. Now, let's talk about, wait, give me 1 second. Okay. Now let's talk about grid. So what is grid? Grid is a way for us to create tables and also to lay out a website. This is kind of like the old-fashioned way of laying out a website, but it's pretty interesting to learn as well. So why not? And let's comment the boxes out. Okay. And get rid of the comment here. Okay. Okay. So right now, as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. And each of them is inside a div tag with a class called grid item. And the parent container for all these div elements are grid container. As you can see, there isn't that much going on right now. It's just like 6 elements in a column, nothing too crazy. There's a question check. Can you send the attendance link again, please? Yeah. One second. All right. And okay, now let's uncomment the CSS properties for the grid container and grid item. If we hit refresh, it suddenly becomes a table with 2 rows and 3 columns filled with 6 numbers. So how does CSS make it? How does CSS do that? First of all, we need to assign display grid to the parent container of the table. So in our case here, it's a grid container. So after you assign display grid, it will automatically make it a table. And also, we need to assign grid template columns. So this is essentially saying that how many columns should we have and how wide all the columns should be. Right now, we have auto, auto, and auto. This means that given a width, we'll automatically assign the width of each column according to the content within each item. So if we make this really long, so if we make one of the element really long and we're still using auto, as you can see, this really long item will just takes up more space. Change it back to 1. So this is auto, auto, auto. And if we delete one of the auto and hit refresh, as you can see, right now it becomes 2 columns. So essentially, it's like the number of autos here kind of like indicate how many columns are we going to have. So what happened? Well, what will happen if we have 4 autos? As you can see, if we have 4 autos and we don't have enough items, there will just be blank spaces left. Okay, now let's change it back. And so besides the auto, what if we want to have fixed widths regardless of the content? What we can do is to manually assign a width. So let's say 80 pixel. If we hit refresh, as you can see, all the 3 items, they now only have, if you're counting everything, it should be 80 pixel. Yeah, let's just make sure it's the case. 58 plus 10, 68. All 58 plus 20, it's 78, and plus 2 is 80. Yeah, that makes sense. And also, there's something called FR. I think it's for frame. So essentially, if you do 1 FR, 2 FR, 2 FR, this is essentially saying that this, when the item has only 1 FR, it will has well, when the item has like 2 FR, it will have twice the space than the one has 1 FR. So if you make it like 3 FR, as you can see, this becomes bigger. If you make it 4, it becomes much bigger. So yeah. Now let's change it back to auto, auto, auto. So yeah, and this is how we would use a grid system. So there's a question. What if you need 50 columns? How do you make this easier? Oh, it's actually a solution. Yeah, that's a good question. There are multiple different ways to do it. It can be a JS solution with the help of Grid, or you can just use Flexbox, which we will be talking about shortly. Flexbox is kind of like the solution to the question you just posed. It's a modern way to do all the website layouts. Yeah, very good question. All right, let's now move on to Flexbox. Let's comment this out. Let's comment this out. Okay. Now let's take a look at Flexbox. So let's say we want to build a nav bar for a company. It's an e-commerce website. And the nav bar, the navigation bar, it contains 4 buttons. First is, or 4 tabs, I should say. First is a home tab, and then it's an on-sale tab, and then summer collection tab, and finally we have a login. We want this to be like just evenly spaced out. One approach is to use the grid thing that we just talked about. However, if we have more and more tabs, it'll be very stupid to like just add auto all over again. So what we can do is to use Flexbox. So comment this, here refresh, and as you can see, now it becomes a nav bar. So how does Flexbox make this a nav bar? So Flexbox is very, very similar to Grid, but it has some very, very nice property. So first of all, how do you make something a Flexbox? You use the keyword display flex. And the structure of the Flexbox is very similar to a Grid container structure. It's so you need to make the outside flex, and then all the inside items will automatically become flex item, similar to the Grid container. And there are also some other properties here, as you can see. But the most important one is justify content. So justify content is essentially saying how all the contents will be distributed inside the Flexbox. There's also a very, very important property called this flex direction, and it defaults to row. So as you can see, if we refresh, nothing changes. However, if we change it to column, it becomes a vertical nav bar, kind of like a drop-down menu. So flex direction, it indicates direction that all the that the items will be aligned. There's also something called row reverse. If you use row reverse, all the items, as you can see, is being placed within reverse order. So instead of home in the first, the home right now is at the end. And yeah, so that's flex direction, row reverse. Let's change back to row. And if we're only using flex direction row, we can just delete it because the Flexbox, it defaults to row. So what's justify content? Justify content is how the items are aligned along the main axis. So when we are using flex direction row, the main axis would be the x-axis, meaning the horizontal axis. And space between is essentially saying that there should be some spaces between each elements, and there should be no spaces around all elements. In contrast, there's a property called space around. And if we hit refresh, as you can see, there are now spaces around the first and the final elements as well. So as you can see, this is a very, very powerful tool. So imagine you have 50 tabs. And if you're trying to build it using the grid system, you need to write 50 of those, which is not that appealing. If you're using a Flexbox, it's very easy. Just reuse the code. There are also some different justify content properties. So for instance, we can do flex start. And what flex start means that it will put all the elements one by one with each other from the start of Flexbox, each one after another. There's also flex end. It's essentially putting all the items one after another. However, it starts from the end. So there's a question in chat. So if you have 50 columns, you can do that with justify content? Yes. If you have infinite number of columns, you can still do justify contents. As long as the width is like large enough, it will behave properly. There's also something called center. So center is essentially, it starts from center, and it will place the items one by one. So this is justify contents. Let's change it back to space thing. There's also a very, very critical attribute called align items. However, it's pretty hard to demonstrate if the boxes are the same. So let's actually vary the box a little bit. So let's say this box has a height of 200 pixel. This box have a height of 600 pixel. And if we hit refresh, oops. Okay. Okay, if we hear, wait, what's happening? Oh yeah, this is, oh, sorry, these are not boxes, like that. These are items. So let's say here we have a nav item, and it's called big item. Or let's just call it big. Here in the big, we have height 200 pixel. As you can see, Flexbox actually just dynamically changes itself, which is pretty neat. If this has a color of blue, okay. All right, now we should be able to see this visually. Actually, we should give the nav item itself some color as well. Let's give it green. All right. So what will happen if we use, let's see. So let's do align items center. As you can see, if we use align items center, all the elements will be aligned center. And the reason for all the items like the height suddenly decreases is that without using align item center, it will default to the whole height. And when we are using align item centers, it will be back to its original height. Or to make this clearer, we can just assign a height. Okay. And now, so when we are doing align item centers, it's saying that along the column, along the row, it's going to be aligning all the items to the center. If we're doing align item start, it says that along this axis, it will align all the items to the start. If we do end, as you can see, they're all here. So you can kind of think of align items and justify content managing two different axes. Justify content is used to distribute elements within one axis, and the align items is used to align all items along the major axis. So yeah. Sorry, do you mind re-explaining flex start? Yes, for sure. Flex start. So flex start is a justified content property. So if we use flex start, as you can see, all the items, it starts from the start of the Flexbox, which in our case is the left side, and it puts all the elements side by side with each other. Why is home not aligned? Home is actually aligned. It's the text that is not aligned. However, the element itself is aligned. And it might be clearer if we have, I guess we can make this larger. So let's do 900 pixel. Oops, a little bit too large. 700, still too large. Yeah, just 300. Okay, so I'm changing the nav bar to like 300 pixel, the container around the nav items. And if we use center, if we use align item center, as you can see, now the elements, they are all aligned center. The home, the text itself will not align center because the text, the handle to make a text align vertically, it relies on some other method. For instance, padding. What Flexbox is doing is essentially aligning all the boxes themselves. Do we have any other questions for Flexbox? So these are the kind of like the three major properties that we're going to use throughout this semester. There are also a lot of other very, very cool Flexbox properties that you can explore on your own. Are there any questions? All right, cool. Now let's talk about specificity. So specificity is kind of a way for you to implement some. So if you have a property that you want to override, however, you cannot simply delete one of the CSS properties. You can use higher specificity to override the lower specificity. And when the specificities are the same, the later ones will override the previous ones. Let's see this in action. So here we have a tag. It's called specificity. It's a div tag. It has an ID of SP and a class of specificity. You also have a text, a paragraph called specificity. If we hit refresh, it's here. Specificity, nothing too crazy about it. However, if we go to specificity and now uncomment this, as you can see, it becomes green, as expected. So however, if you want to override this green, there are different methods. The first method is to provide a to provide the same CSS kind of like selector after the previous one. So if you do color blue instead, right now if you refresh, as you can see, it becomes color blue. And this is not like having a 50-50 chance of selecting either green or blue. Every time it's being rendered, it's always going to be blue because the later ones will override the previous ones. However, say if you don't want to use the later ones to override the previous one, you want to have different sorts of specificity. How are you going to do? Let's see. So let's take a look at this to specificity. And here it's red. Let's actually change it. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's make it blue. So here, as you can see, we are selecting the class, and then we are making it blue. However, let's say we want to change it to green. And right now here, we are actually selecting the ID. And if we hit refresh, as you can see, it becomes green. If we are only selecting the class, it's not going to make it green. However, if we're selecting ID, ID has a higher specificity than the class. As a result, selecting ID will override the selecting class decision. Okay, so there's some question in chat. Yes, CSS is being rendered top down. Yeah, exactly. That's why the later ones will always override the previous ones. And I know I haven't listed out here, but let's list out. So in terms of specificity, this is CSS specificity, kind of like rank. The ID has a higher specificity class, which has a higher specificity than the tag. So say if you want to override something, you should probably add an ID to the item and then override it this way. So yeah. Does this make sense so far? Do you have any questions for specificity? Alrighty, now let's move on to something else, which I forget to include in the code demo. Sorry about that. Let me go through this real quick. CSS. I think we do need to cover, yeah, we do need to cover pseudo class. Okay, sorry about that. Let me create something real quick. Okay. So let's return to our lovely boxes. And now let's talk about pseudo classes. Okay, so pseudo class. Okay, and boxes, so I'll cover all this. Oops, wait, make sure I'll cover this. Okay, cool. So right now we have our boxes back. And usually when you go onto a website and you hover over a button, you will see the button changes color. So let's go to Apple, for instance. And Apple is pretty subtle about this, but I don't know whether you can see it. If you hover upon like iPhone, the text of the iPhone kind of lights up for a bit. And this is accomplished not by JavaScript, but actually by CSS. So, and this is something called the pseudo class. So let's say we're still trying to play around with box2. And let's say that we want to, when the user hovers onto box2 and the box2 it changes color. So what we are going to do is using this and use hover. So this column here, it's essentially saying that it's an indication of the pseudo class. And if you apply hover after it, and let's change this to green, hit refresh. So when the cursor, why it lags a little bit, that's kind of weird. It's probably because of them. Yeah, zoom overlay has some bug, actually, I think. But essentially, box2 right now, if the user hovers over box2, it will changes to green. we can do a lot of things with it. We can not only change its color, background color, we can also change the text color. For instance, if we want to change it to red, it can become red. And usually to indicate a button, we can also change the cursor to a pointer. As you can see, now the cursor becomes a pointer, right? Like outside of the box, it's a normal cursor. And when it lands inside the box, it becomes a pointer. And this is kind of like a very crucial thing when you're trying to make your own button style. So yeah. There are also a lot of very, very cool pseudo classes. I think the Notion doc has covered quite a lot of it. But yeah. Do we have any questions for the pseudo class? Cool. Now let's talk about another pseudo class. Okay. So this pseudo class is something that belongs to a link. So here's a link. There's a question. So our pseudo class is a class with extra functionality. Yeah, it's kind of like a class with extra functionality, but it's usually to kind of like select a class when it's on like certain different state, I would say. Do pseudo class primarily deal with mouse actions? They deal with lots of stuff. But usually, yeah, it's with mouse action. I would say the majority use case is with mouse action. What's a hashtag for the reference? So the hashtag, it simply means it will route back to yourself. So if we click it, as you can see, it routes back to itself. It doesn't do anything essentially. Now let's take a look. So when you click on a link, as you can see, it becomes orange, red-ish, and then when you release it, it becomes like purple. And if we want to change it, it's pretty easy. So let's give it a class. Let's call it link. Link. And let's say that when the user hovers over it, we want to make this a block element. We want to have a height of 20 pixel, a width of 40 pixel, and a background color of a nice grayish color. If we hit refresh, we should probably make the link default to a block element as well. Let's just make our life easier. Okay, and let's delete it. Yeah, let's just say we're changing the color to a little bit grayish. Okay, so here's a link. Actually, let's make our width a little bit larger, 80 pixel. Cool. Maybe the height is not really enough. Let's change those to 100 pixel. Okay, this is much better. So if we hover over it, as you can see, it becomes kind of like a grayish boxes. There's also a pretty cool cool property called visited. Essentially, if you click on a link and then release your mouse, the link will become visited. So if we change this to, let's say, a red, click it, wait. This is kind of weird. Oh, it's probably because it's already visited before. So yeah, we can't really like reverse that action, like the visit action. But yeah, once it's visited and you hover on it, it becomes visited. So yeah. That's why usually people don't use visited and simply use hover, and the behavior will be much more consistent. Why does that change only on hover? Yeah, I wonder that as well, actually. Let's see. Visited. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, it should not be like this. Is it because default link is white somewhere? Yes, I think it should probably always be red after it's clicked. We can create our own classes in CSS and use them in tandem with built-in classes, right? Yes. What do you mean by built-in classes? Usually we don't have any built-in classes. Yeah, the red background, this is kind of weird because like the link, as you can see, is blue, but somehow the background doesn't stay that way. I will get back to y'all like after lecture. If you add a background color to the link, it will be red permanently. Okay, let's try this. Oh, yeah, it works. That's pretty weird. I think there's another link CSS selector that's saying background must always be white. Oh, really? I don't think so. But yeah. Maybe it's causing the trouble. It keeps coming back to the same page. I think the reason for it being like for the background not being red, it's because that the pseudo classes are like not actually real classes. So it can only change just the attribute. This is just a hypothesis. Okay, I'm not really sure about that either, but it will only change the attribute if you have the attribute in the original CSS class in the first place. This is just my hypothesis. I'm not sure. But yeah. Cool. So this is about pseudo class. And I think we've covered everything. Are there any other questions or questions in general? All right, cool. If that's the case, I'm going to stop sharing. Stop the